For 9 seasons, from 1974 to 1983, Karen Grassle played Caroline Ingalls, Ma, on Little House on the Prairie. She was the moral center of a beloved family, the woman who held everything together when hardship threatened to break them. She was America's television mother. The role made her a household name and defined her career. But behind the scenes, in the space between takes on the set where that wholesome family drama was constructed, something darker was happening. And for 40 years, Karen Grassle remained silent about it. Now, at 82 years old, she's finally breaking that silence. What she's revealed about her experience working alongside Landon, the show's creator and star, has shocked the fans who grew up watching them on screen together. It's a story about power, about the price of speaking up, and about what happens when the image we trust on television doesn't match the reality behind closed doors. Let's find out what she's carried all these years. But before we dive into what really happened on that set, stay with us, because the full story is far more complicated than a simple tale of mistreatment. It's about a woman who chose grace over revenge, and a reckoning that came decades too late. Karen Grassle was a classically trained actress with a background in theater. She had appeared in minor television roles and had built a respectable but not spectacular career. Then in 1974, she auditioned for the role of Caroline Ingalls, the mother in what would become one of television's most iconic shows. The role was life-changing. Little House on the Prairie wasn't just another television program, it was a cultural phenomenon. The show ran for 9 seasons and became a cornerstone of American television in the 1970s and early 1980s. Grassle's performance as Caroline was nuanced and powerful. She wasn't just a supporting player, she was the emotional anchor of the entire series. Every episode hinged on her wisdom, her sacrifice, her ability to make hard choices for her family. Audiences connected with her because she felt real, flawed, strong, deeply human. The show itself was built on the legacy of Laura Ingalls Wilder's beloved books, which gave it cultural weight and authenticity that many television programs couldn't claim. Landon, who played Charles Ingalls and served as the creative force behind the show, was already a star when Little House began. He'd been the lead on the hugely successful Western series Bonanza for 14 years. At 41 years old when the show premiered, Landon was at the peak of his power in the entertainment industry. He wasn't just an actor on the show, he was its creator, executive producer, writer, and director. He controlled every aspect of what appeared on screen. He was the show's beating heart, or so viewers believed, and his authority on set was absolute. The chemistry between Grassle and Landon became central to the show's success. The family dynamic felt genuine because the actors played it with authenticity. Grassle's performance earned her critical respect and a devoted following. Yet despite this central role, her compensation never matched Landon's, despite her being every bit as essential to the show's success. This disparity would become the first crack in what appeared to be a harmonious working relationship. By the 3rd season of Little House, Karen Grassle decided to ask for a raise. It was a reasonable request. The show had become a massive hit. Sponsors were paying premium rates. The network was profiting enormously. Grassle had proven her value repeatedly. She delivered powerful, emotionally complex performances that audiences responded to. She was doing the same work as Landon, in scenes that were just as important, and in many cases scenes that carried the emotional weight of entire episodes. What happened next, according to Grassle's account in her 2021 memoir Bright Lights, Prairie Dust, would define her remaining time on the show. When she asked for financial parity, Landon didn't deny her request outright. Instead, he simply made her regret having asked. Her scenes began shrinking. Dialogue was cut from her scripts without explanation. In a documented pattern that would repeat itself, Landon found ways to diminish her presence on screen without ever having a confrontation about it. More insidious was the shift in the atmosphere on set. Landon began directing crude jokes at Grassle with increasing frequency. Colleagues noted that the humor had an edge that went beyond standard set banter. It wasn't playful, it was pointed, designed to undermine her confidence and assert his dominance. To observers, these seemed like isolated incidents. In context, they formed a pattern. This was Landon's method of control, not through direct conflict, but through the slow erosion of her professional standing and personal comfort. But this was only the beginning of what emerged years later when Grassle finally spoke about her experience. And the details she shared changed how an entire generation thought about one of their favorite television shows. During the later seasons of Little House, the tension on set had reached a point where the atmosphere had become unmistakably hostile. but it was never public. Audiences watching at home had no idea. The show continued to air heartwarming episodes about family values and moral fortitude, while behind the scenes, a very different dynamic was playing out. What made the situation even more complicated was Landon's behavior off-set. During this same period, Landon began an affair with Cindy Clerico, a production assistant on the show who was in her 20s while Landon was in his 50s. The affair became increasingly difficult to conceal because Landon made little effort to hide it. He was the most powerful person on that set, and his power insulated him from consequences. Nobody was going to confront him about it, not the network executives who wanted to protect their hit show, not the other cast members who depended on the work, not Grassle, who was already dealing with diminished opportunities after asking for a raise. What made this particularly striking was the contrast it created with the show's content. Little House on the Prairie preached values of fidelity, family commitment, and moral integrity. Charles Ingalls, the character Landon played, was portrayed as a man of unquestionable moral fiber, a father and husband who would do anything for his family's well-being. This character was Landon's public identity. It was what made him beloved. Meanwhile, the actor himself was living a very different story. For Grassle, this period represented a kind of professional and personal betrayal on multiple levels. She had been a dedicated, professional actor. She had given powerful performances. She had helped build this show into something meaningful and culturally significant. And in return, she'd watched as her professional standing eroded because she'd had the audacity to ask for equal pay, while the man who controlled everything had his indiscretions tolerated, even accommodated, because of his power. What Grassle's story reveals is a pattern that extended beyond one person's behavior. It illuminates several systemic failures that were endemic to television production in that era. On Little House on the Prairie, Michael Landon wasn't just the lead actor. He was the creator, writer, and executive producer. He had complete creative control. This meant that any conflict between Landon and another actor would always be resolved in his favor. The system was literally constructed to ensure his dominance. When Grassle asked for a raise, she was asking the person who had complete power over her career to voluntarily share that power. It was an impossible position. Even by 1970 standards, the disparity between what Grassle and Landon were paid was notable. Grassle was doing equal work, sometimes carrying episodes emotionally, yet earning significantly less. This wage gap didn't exist because she was less talented, it existed because the system valued her labor less. She was, in essence, subsidizing the show's budget through her reduced compensation. Landon's affair with a production assistant was an open secret that nobody felt empowered to address. He was too important to the network's bottom line. Confront him about his affair, and you might lose him. Lose him, and you lose the show. The economic reality gave Landon complete protection. He wasn't being rewarded for moral behavior, he was being protected because of commercial value. The crude jokes Landon directed at Grassle operated in a gray zone. They weren't explicit enough to constitute harassment that could be formally addressed. They were deniable. Landon could claim he was just joking, that everyone was joking around. But the cumulative effect of being systematically mocked on a professional set is deeply damaging. It's a method of control that relies on plausible deniability. These patterns reveal that Grassle's experience wasn't an anomaly, it was emblematic of how power operated in the entertainment industry, particularly for women, during that era. But the most powerful part of this story isn't the mistreatment itself. It's what Karen Grassle chose to do when Michael Landon was dying, decades later. Stay with us. By the late 1980s and early 1990s, Karen Grassle's career had moved forward. She'd left Little House and taken on other roles. She'd built a life beyond that show. She'd processed her experience and, crucially, she'd refused to let it define her. She didn't spend decades waiting for an apology. She didn't spend her life trying to destroy Landon's legacy. Then, in 1991, Michael Landon was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. He was terminal. The man who had wielded so much power on set was facing his mortality. And Karen Grassle, given a choice about how to respond to this news, chose something extraordinary. She wrote him a letter. It wasn't an indictment. It wasn't a catalogue of grievances. It was a letter of forgiveness. According to what Grassle has since shared, when Landon read her letter, he wept. Those who were close to him said it moved him deeply. He was facing the end of his life, and the woman he had treated unjustly was offering him grace rather than recrimination. Landon died in July 1991, just weeks after receiving Grassle's letter. For decades, Grassle didn't publicize this exchange. She didn't use it to rehabilitate her own image or to generate sympathy. She'd simply forgiven him privately and moved on. It was only years later, when she published her memoir Bright Lights, Prairie Dust in 2021, that the public learned about the mistreatment she'd endured and, more importantly, about her choice to respond with forgiveness rather than anger. What strikes many people about Karen Grassle's story is how different it feels from contemporary narratives about accountability in entertainment. This isn't a story about a powerful man being destroyed by his misdeeds. It's not even primarily a story about justice being served. Instead, it's a story about someone who chose to carry her experience with dignity and, ultimately, to release it without demanding retribution. When Grassle's memoir was published in 2021, it circulated among fans and critics who had grown up watching Little House on the Prairie. Her account didn't destroy Michael Landon's legacy. His legacy as a creative force in television remained intact. But it complicated it. Landon is now remembered not as a flawless creator, but as a human being who was capable of both genuine artistic vision and interpersonal cruelty. His talent and his flaws can now coexist in our understanding of him. That's perhaps more honest than either pure veneration or complete dismissal. Other cast members and former crew members have since added their own accounts of Landon's controlling behavior. The picture that emerges isn't of a monster. It's of a man who used his power the way many powerful people do, to consolidate that power and to protect himself from any threat to it. When someone challenged that power, as Grassle did by asking for a raise, Landon responded by making her regret it. Today, at 82 years old, Karen Grassle represents something increasingly rare in entertainment, a woman who was wronged, who had every right to be bitter, and who chose instead to tell her truth with grace. She didn't demand the entertainment industry be burned down. She didn't spend her life seeking revenge. She simply decided, late in her life, to speak plainly about what happened, to offer her experience to others who might find something meaningful in it, and to move forward. Her story raises important questions that go beyond one show or one actor. How do we acknowledge the real harm that occurs in professional environments built on unequal power? How do we honor the contributions of people like Grassle who were undervalued despite their talents? How do we understand figures like Landon as both creators and flawed human beings? And what does accountability actually look like when the person in question is gone? These aren't questions with easy answers. Karen Grassle's life suggests that sometimes the answer isn't about public vindication or dramatic confrontation. Sometimes it's about simply refusing to let someone else's behavior determine your own character. So here's my question for you. Do you think Karen Grassle's choice to forgive Michael Landon was an act of strength or a form of silence that allowed his behavior to go unaccounted for? And how should we navigate honoring the legacy of Little House on the Prairie, a show that meant everything to so many people, while also acknowledging the complex reality of how it was made? Drop your honest thoughts in the comments below, because this conversation belongs to all of us. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the real stories behind the television we grew up loving.